What up, YouTube? It's your boy, Detroit Love, with another video. Today we're going to take a look at this Galaga, look at what it takes to modify it. Got junk all over the place. Let's get it started. I really enjoy Galaga. Galaga is one of the first games that really got me excited about arcades. I was playing Galaxian, and I always thought that game was just set up to just take your quarter. The way those ships would just dive bomb at you, you know, it was. I enjoyed it, but I was so glad when Galaga came out, because now you really had an opportunity to utilize your skills and actually play the game. And so, while that's true, you know, I want some options. This Galaga is a cool game, but it only comes with 2 games, and I am a big fan of vertical games, and so to be able to play more than just these 2 games is definitely something that I am excited to do. Now, I have a 3/4 scale Arcade1up Galaga cabinet that's modified as well, has a real coin door on it, and takes quarters, and that is fantastic. And I have taken it out to events and set it up and played, but it's not really portable. So I want to duplicate that, minus the coin door, of course, and to give myself the ability to play vertical games, all of the vertical games, but in a more portable package. And so today we're just going to get an introductory to the direction I'm taking with my modding ideas, and we just want to talk about some of the options that are available for modding and which direction I chose to go in. So let's just talk about the basics. In order to utilize this built-in screen to go with a different source, we have to talk about what's required, what's necessary for this cabinet to function. And so you need a screen to view. You need a control panel to turn it on, off, work with the volume, play the game, right? Start the game, play the game, interact with the game. You need some controls. And you need a brain or a computer inside to allow it to do what you want it to do. And obviously you need a power source so that you can plug this thing up, get all this stuff to work and play. And so let's just examine what I am looking to do with this. The controls is important because it's going to decide what games that you can play. So you have some options here. Now, by default, this control panel is restricted to go just left and right. Left and right is all you can do with this, versus with this Miss Pac-Man, you can go 8-way, okay? So you can't go up and down, it's restricted. So you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do? Are you gonna just strictly stick with games? If you mod it, are you gonna stick with games that just go left and right and require 1 button, or just go left and right and don't require a button? I'm not even sure if one of those exists, but if you didn't want to modify this control panel, that's what you're limited to out the gate. But you can easily drill this hole out and put a different joystick in here, and now you have the ability to go 8 directions and have 1 button. So you have to think about those things. Do you want to try and drill through this plexi and drill through the control panel? And if you do, to what extent? Do you want to add a second button here? second button there, you're going to be restricted on what you can do based on the size of your buttons, how much space is in here. You got the speaker here that's going to take up some of that space there, so I wouldn't necessarily be able to put a button here because it's slanted. So you have to think about button placement. Am I going to drill this? How many buttons can I get in there? Are the buttons going to be playable? Ideally, it would be nice if this joystick was over a little bit. That give you a little more space. So it's really complicated. You have to think about what you want to do there. I mean, trying to get a different button configuration inside gets pretty complicated. As you can see, that speaker on the left, that whole board is slanted, so it's going to dictate what can be placed anywhere near that. That joystick is pretty wide, so that's going to limit what can be done. Even me wanting to replace that joystick with my Sanwa joystick is going to be tricky, because the Sanwa is rectangle where this is square, and as you can see, that square butts right up here to these power switches. So it's not a whole lot of room in here. So you can see that speaker is right there. So you have the space, but this board is 1/2 inch. It's not flush. So underneath, there's like a 1/2 inch. You know, there's a lip here, right? So you're losing like a total inch or so there. So there's no room on that front anywhere. Again, this is most likely can be moved over just a tad bit there to give you room for a button. So if you're looking at this here, you know, where can you possibly put the buttons? Here and here, possibly. You're just talking about this little tight space, and you can see there's not a whole lot of room there at all. So again, you might, even when you start coming into this direction, this board is slanted. So then the buttons I have are super long, so they're not going to, definitely won't go. You see how small these buttons are. And I'm sure I have some extra buttons that's small like this, but then, so we'll have to see. I prefer to have the buttons that I want. I may have like the main button be the long one, and have the secondary buttons be these crappy buttons. We shall see. But you see the power and the speaker, you don't have a whole lot of room on this board, and you don't have a whole lot of room down in here, and you don't have a lot of room on this kick plate either, because you see they have these grooves cut in there already. I'm assuming that was for other countercades, because those holes aren't utilized here at all. Even with the, well, I guess it is. No, that white board don't get interfered by that at all. So, but the point is, it's tight in there. So 1 or 2 buttons. You don't need more than 3 buttons, period, with a vertical only at all. You got a little room up here. If you can get some smaller buttons, you have a little room down on that kick plate that's way at the base for possibly putting a button or 2 there. Say if you move these buttons there on the base, then that'll give you 3 buttons up there, but then the artwork's going to be off. So those are the things you have to contemplate. Do you want to just buy a third party control panel where they do all the things for it? You pay them some money and they design the control panel for you. So whether you want 6 buttons here and buttons down here for your start and select, how do you want to do that? How many buttons do you need on your control panel? Now with a Raspberry Pi, you are typically going to need a player 1 start and then the coin buttons. So where are you going to put those coin buttons? Will they be full-size buttons like this, or can you get away with smaller size buttons for those functions? And where would you put them? So those things you have to think about what you want to do, because all of that is going to decide what direction you go for your cabinet. I want to go with 3 buttons, so that would be 2 additional buttons, so that I can play a game, say like Gunsmoke, because it requires 3 buttons. But it's really tight in here, and will I be able to do it without having to purchase a modded control panel? That's going to be my challenge. So if I mess up, then I'll have to go and buy a control panel, and I'll list they'll pop up here on the screen some options for you to buy those control panels. Okay, so now you've decided how many buttons you want, and you're going to have to decide, are you going to cut yourself or are you going to just buy from somewhere else? All right, so I decided to go with a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. So that's going to be your computer that you need. That's the brains. And so that will replace the PCB that's in there. You're gonna need a power supply. Now because this is a more than one item in here, you're gonna need multiple power sources. And so I like this power strip because it's small. It has enough space between the two so that you can, if you're required to have some power bricks, you can accommodate those. Say if you have a power brick that's big like this, that can plug in and you still have room to put in another one that's duplicate to the side. Or you have power here where you can choose not to have a brick and just plug straight into it. So you need a power source from the wall to your cabinet, and this is a great source. It's compact and it's very versatile with many options. All right, so that'll power up your Raspberry Pi. Your Raspberry Pi also is going to need a few things. You're going to need a memory card. And memory card is so cheap. This 32 gig is like $7 or so. I don't really need 32 gig for vertical only, but it's so cheap, it doesn't make sense to try and find anything smaller. One thing to consider with the Raspberry Pi, it has a MircoUSB power source. You may want to consider a power source that has its own on-off switch. Okay, either toggle or push button. And like I said, depending on your power strip, you can decide whether you need to have a brick on here, if you're going to plug into the standard power outlet, or just a USB if you're going to plug into a USB slot for power. All right, and you want to have some heat sinks to help keep your device computer from overheating. All right, so we have our brains, we have our CPU, so that's all set there. Then we're going to need, in order to use the built-in monitor, we're going to need a converter board. Now, that's to use a stock screen. You also have an option of buying a different screen, and if it'll work cased or decasing it and going through all that, that just takes standard HDMI. You have that option. But if you want to use the stock, you will have to get something like this. Now, Geek sells this kit. It works with both the version 1 Countercade as well as the version 2 or generation 2, which is what I have. It's really nice because it comes with a 3D printed holding bracket, and it'll just mount right up where the PCB is removed. So it comes with everything you need to use the stock power button and a stock speaker. So it has connections for those. All right. So it comes with power to power the actual controller board and HDMI, which it also includes the micro HDMI if you are going to use like a Pi 4. I'm using a Pi 3, so I wouldn't need this adapter. So that comes with everything you need. So you have your computer board, in this case the Pi, and you have your video controller board. All right, and so now we need controls. So I have this Sanwa joystick. You can only use one joystick. That's really small. I wouldn't be able to put two joysticks on there at all. And then decide how many buttons you need. So I need 2 extra buttons. I just have these buttons laying around, which are fine. They're concave, which I like. Preferably, since the stock button is red, I would prefer to have all red, but I don't have any in stock. I don't feel like buying any more. So if I go with a 2-button configuration, which I may have to do that based on spacing and on that control board. But if I go with 3, I may keep the stock red one and add 2 black. So I just have to figure out what's my configuration I'm going to use. All right. In order for these buttons and the new joystick to work with the Pi, you're going to need a encoder board. This encoder board is about $9 or so. I'll have a list for all the parts. It comes with a USB cable that'll plug into the Pi, and all the cables that you would need for whatever buttons that you have. And so there's some optional things that you may want to get for cable management, for mounting. This is one of my favorite, Velcro. This is Extreme Outdoor, for mounting some of these parts, mainly the Pi, but I think I'm going to use standoff brass for that. But I always have that in my supplies to cover up the screw holes once you're all done. You'll need some of these, and for wire management, you may need some of these little brackets. They just stick on and you're in business. So that is a quick and dirty look at the parts that we're going to need. Now, depending on where this goes, there may be other things that I may consider. So we're looking at a dissected view of the components for the modded Galaga Countercade Generation 2. And so this is the entire guts that would need to go inside. Now there's some components that you won't see here, like the built-in power switch and the volume switch and the player 1 and player 2. Also missing our coin buttons, which I have to decide which route I want to go for those. But just to give you an idea of how it works. And so you see, this is the brains, or the Raspberry Pi. This is the computer that will control everything. It needs to be able to view something. Now, again, this is just alternative monitor that actually just takes HDMI, so that's going straight to the Raspberry Pi. But in our case with the Galaga version 2 or generation 2, we would need this controller converter board to convert it from the interface that it requires here. You see the ribbon cable to HDMI, which is on the side. So in this broken down view, I just didn't take the screen out of the Galaga, but just want you to see all this stuff working as it is. So we have our computer, we have our display, and we need controls. So this controls requires this controller board, which uses a USB cable and connects into a available port on the Raspberry Pi. This controller board, or this encoder board, you see it there, it says game control board. It allows you to plug in your joystick right in there, and no matter what number of buttons that you're going to use, in this case I'm using 3, they'll just plug in on that side of the board. Okay, and whenever you plug in new controls into the Raspberry Pi emulation station, it's going to detect that it has new controllers available. And so as I press this button, you can see that flashing. So as I'm pressing, that flashes. If I hold it down, then it'll give me the ability to program that. I'm not going to do this at this time, but you can see the Arcade1up screen is back there. So it's all ready to go. So all these things are connected. We have our power source. Again, with this power strip, we have the ability to plug the USB cables in directly, or we can use power bricks and plug them in, and you have plenty of room. So you see it's the third port there, so it gives you some flexibility. And so that's just a broken down view. For setting up and configuring, you may need a keyboard and a mouse to be able to set up Wi-Fi and things like that. You can use a controller, but then you still need a keyboard to be able to enter. Because you're going to need to get to a prompt, or you want to be able to connect in over the wireless network to get in to do any configurations of this device. But if you're not going to do any of that stuff, you shouldn't need that if you're not going to connect to Wi-Fi and those type of things and add games on remotely. You can always pop out the card, the SD card there, you see it on the left there, and take it to a computer using one of these sleds, and you can add more games. But this is just a broken down overview. We got our power coming from the wall, is powering up the screen and the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi has its connections to the controls through this encoder board, which allows you to control the game, and that's it. Let's just look at the back of this. So, as most of you may know, I have this handle so that you can easily transport this. Now, this is going to get heavier due to all the extra stuff you're putting in there. And so, you know, there's no way to really carry this easily with one hand. It's doable, but where do you hold on to it? That's where the handle comes in. So I'm most likely going to do that. And the other thing that I have to consider, will I put the hinges on here? Because if I stick with the power where I have to use the wall power, I don't necessarily need hinges on here. But if I go with a battery solution, which that's what I'm leaning towards, similar to this, where you see I have the battery supply, 97%, battery lasts forever. So I'm considering doing the battery option. Now you can see in there, that's how this one looks identical in there, minus the battery. And so you can see this would be removed and replaced with that video card. The Pi would have to be mounted somewhere. The encoder board would have to be mounted somewhere. And so I have to figure out the arrangement. If I'm going to go with a battery solution, I'm pretty much going to want to need this floor to stay bare. Whether I'm using the battery or I'm using the power strip, that would be the only thing on the floor if I can help it. Everything else would have to be mounted somewhere else. And so based on cable distances, lengths, cable lengths, and things like that, will determine where I'm able to put everything at. So the goal is to have everything mounted on the sidewalls or on the back of this monitor. I don't want to put anything on the door because I want to be able to swing that open if I'm going with a battery solution. And so those are the things I have to determine what I'm going to do. This little ring is double-sided. It just comes with a lot of the Arcade1up products on the box. In this case, I cut this actual board here. I think if I do this, I'll just bring it down a little bit, and so that this lines up with the line, and you can still grab this here without that being cut. So we'll take a look at that as we get deeper into the project. So here I put in this little catch, put in this little handle just to make it easier. I could have been opening and closing with this hole, but you know, like options. There you go. So that's what I have to contend with. I still have some things to figure out and decide exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm just giving you food for thought. But the first thing you have to do is get that video controller board from Geek Sales if you want to mod it, no matter what option or route you go. You can put a JAMA board in here, 60-in-1. You're still going to need that video controller board. All right, so that's it for this video. Just wanted to go over the components of what I'm considering, some of the options I'm considering. The next time you see and hear from me with this Galaga, it should be the building process. We're going to go step by step on how to transform this stock Arcade1up Countercade Generation 2 cabinet into a full-fledged modded cabinet that can play all the vertical games. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. What if anything, are you going to do with your Galaga? Do you want to put a handle on it? Do you want to put a battery in it so it's totally portable? You don't have to rely on a power cord or cable to be plugged in. You can just set it up just like this Miss Pac-Man. Set it up anywhere you want it, turn it on, and start playing. Do you want to do that with your Galaga or your Countercade? Do you want to put a 60-in-1 in? Do you want to put vertical and horizontal games? So you can put a 6-button layout with a custom control panel and play Street Fighter and all these other games. Do you want to put console games on yours so you can play, you know, some of the Nintendo games or Atari games? Do you want to put a spinner on here or a trackball? What do you want to do with yours? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. Hit the notification so that when I get this build video together and release it, you'll be notified. All right, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to look at this introductory to the modding of the Galaga Countercade. Until next time, guys, I'll see you on the web.